Okay. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming to this poetry reading. My name is Ashley. I'm the operations manager at Eastern Edge, and I'm really excited to get to host this event. We will have readings today from Michelle Sylliboy, Douglas Walbourne-Gough, and Shaolin Jodry as a part of the symposium. So the symposium is part of a larger project called Art as a Tool for Change that has been taking place at Eastern Edge since October 2021. Art as a Tool for Change recognizes art as an empowering tool to facilitate critical dialogue around feminism, anti-racism, 2S LGBTQIA+ rights, environmental activism, and more. The symposium weekend features workshops, discussions, and presentations that will highlight diverse artists from across Canada whose work is empowering, inspiring, and challenges social paradigms. I would like to thank our funder, the Canada Arts Presentation Fund. This project would not have been possible without their generous support. And I am going to read a land acknowledgement for St. John's, Newfoundland. That's where I'm located, that's where Eastern Edge is located, and that's sort of the center for this symposium. So we respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we are occupying is the unceded and ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and that Uktahumguk, known as the island of Newfoundland, is the homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatukavut and the Innu of Nitassinan as the original people of Labrador. This acknowledgement is a commitment that we practice in action, striving for respectful relationships with all people across Turtle Island. So we have 3 readers today. I'm going to introduce them each before they speak, and then we're going to have a group question period at the end. Our first reader will be Douglas Walbourne-Gough. Douglas is a member of the Halapu Mi'kmaq First Nations from Corner Brook, Newfoundland. His poetry and reviews have appeared in journals and magazines across Canada, and he has worked in editorial capacities with both the Fiddlehead and Riddle Fence. His first collection, Crow Gulch, was named the winner of the 2021 E.J. Pratt Poetry Award, was shortlisted for the 2020 Raymond Souster Award, the 2019 Derek Walcott Prize for Poetry, and the 2021 N.L. Reads Award. He was also nominated for the 2022-21 First Nation Communities Read Award. He is currently a PhD candidate in English/creative writing, UNB Fredericton. So I would like to hand it over to Douglas now.
Well, Alan, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. So just a little bit about me first. Anyone who has seen a copy or has a copy of Crow Gulch will notice that in the back I describe myself as a mixed and adopted Mi'kmaq. So for the sake of positionality, I just want to say, for me, my status, my identity, as far as being Mi'kmaq, comes through my dad's side. Also, my dad is he's technically my stepdad. Him and my mom met when I was 2. He's since become my father in every sense of the word that one could. So mixed/adopted is the best, most honest way I can put that forward. And I just want to make sure that's quite clear for everyone. And it's just good practice for myself to always, kind of let everybody know where I'm coming from. So speaking about art as a tool for change, when I was researching, writing, and even when Crow Gulch first came out, I knew there was potential for something to happen, but I didn't realize the good things that kind of could and did happen. Some of which being people reaching out and saying their family members and their parents or grandparents' generation for the first time coming out and saying, yeah, that's where I'm from. People reaching out to me privately to tell me these things. Some people stopping me in the street saying, thank you for what you've did. We can finally speak of this a little more openly. There's been, multiple CBC coverage around this between radio documentaries, news stories, interviews. More recently, fellow Mi'kmaq and themselves visual artists, Jordan Bennett and Marcus Goss, have created a beautiful mural in Corner Brook commemorating Crow Gulch and the fact that only 60 years ago, this vibrant community was here. This is where my dad and his family come from. And since then, I know people who were teachers who were telling me, I'm taking my kids to go see this and telling them about Crow Gulch, helping them learn, ask questions. When it wasn't that long ago, I'm only 39, And, you know, I might have been maybe the last generation, but generations before me, you know, they were taught that the Mi'kmaq were brought over to Newfoundland as mercenaries under French hire to kill the Beothuk. This is incredibly damaging, untrue. The scholarships behind it to disprove it. So hopefully, you know, every time we take a little step like this, and I say we because this is by no means a solo effort, it gives me a bit more faith that art can do something more than just be a canvas, be a book, be a song. So it, you know, it heartens me deeply. In all of that, being a Newfoundlander, there's also this unignorable fact of like over 500 years of colonization as an island. And so I was reading an essay of Mary Dalton's a while back from her collection Edge, and she has this really beautiful way to describe the Dictionary of Newfoundland English. And she talks about it as a book to break spells because, as she writes, when she was young attending school, her Newfoundland accent, her idioms were best left at home, and her European schoolmasters kind of wanted to push that out, try to correct her language. And so the DNE, or Dictionary of Newfoundland English, was a way to like kind of revive the language, the culture, the sound, the music of it. And I totally agree. But I also take issue with the book because it's a book also steeped in colonialism itself. So it's a book I sit on two sides with. So I'm just going to start with this poem. It's just found text from the DNE and published with permission of the University of Toronto, who published the DNE originally. It's called Definition, and it dissects all the different dictionary entries for the word jackatar. Appellation for a common sailor. A Newfoundlander of mixed French and Micmac Indian descent. That pronunciation phonetically within the book. I went to see a poor man who has been very ill for 7 months. He and all his family belong to a much despised and neglected race called Jackatars. They speak an impure dialect of French and Indian, Roman Catholics, and of almost lawless habits. Jackatar, a West Coast Newfoundlander of half French or Indian extraction. The Scots remained resistant to intermarriage with the French for many years, although marriage occurred in increasing numbers, labeling the French Jackatars, a synonym for half-breeds. Junois Brook, Shallop Cove, and Bankhead, settlements known on the west coast of Newfoundland as the homes of the Jackatars, or dark people, or the French Indians. We met 2 Jackitar hunters from the west coast, and they told us we would need a boat to cross the Humber River. A person on the west coast believed to be of mixed French and Micmac Indian descent. In recent decades, an epithet referring to certain individuals of dark complexion with a French accent and intonation in their speech. In the winter, the Jackatars chiefly subsist on eels. They are a lazy, indolent people, and I am told, addicted to thieving. In the winter and spring, they are frequently in very destitute circumstances. They are looked upon by the English and French as a degraded race, then-styled Jackatars or runaways. The name by which deserters from the French Navy are known in Newfoundland. 1988, Sunday Express, 24th of April, page 2. He noted that in the 40s, Francophones in Newfoundland suffered discrimination and were labeled Jackatars. 1881, Evening Telegram, 26th of October. A Jackatar sympathetically suggested that a drop of Old Tom or rum was a grand thing to steady one at sea. 1990, Evening Telegram, 1st of March, page 28. In Newfoundland, the French, for centuries living on the west coast of the province, are still being referred to as Jackatars. I'm not sure what the term means, but everybody agrees that it is not a term of endearment. So not the most poetic piece, but I thought and think very important. And I don't often read this one at readings, but my thesis work has got me thinking about 500 and we're going on 550 years of colonized mines and land. And then also, if anyone's been following the Halapu, Mi'kmaq, and Roman process, and process that is still ongoing and anything but smooth or straightforward or fair, to be a Halapu, Mi'kmaq, Newfoundlander right now is a bit of a weird thing to reckon with if you want to really think on it, which I can't help but do. But another beautiful thing about this book are the people that for me are the reasons I wrote it. And this piece is named Ella Josephine Campbell after my father's mother, who with her own mother, Amelia Campbell, arrived in Crow Gulch, originally from Ship Cove out around the Sandy Point, Bay St. George, southwest coast area. And yeah, Ella, my nan, she passed away when I was 8. So I don't have a whole lot of memory and connection to her. And I try to think and write more about her because my grandfather, her husband, Rudy, he comes to me in dreams quite a bit over the last 10 years. It's been a real gift, but I still can't, yeah, my grandmother's only come to me in one dream and very fleetingly. But hopefully, if I can keep writing and thinking and feeling along these lines, I can reconnect with her in the dreams again. Slim, slight, sinew and bird bones, the cords of her hands like spruce roots. She came from Ship Cove to Crow Gulch with little more than the child inside her, landed in a small shack flanked by an outhouse and train tracks. She made it work, had to. No surviving a place like this without some acceptance, some yield to the blunt force of what must be done. She lived for a dance on the weekend or a game of bingo during the week. Draped in her favorite sweater, blue-green swirls on black and 3 times her size. Her costume pearls with earrings to match. Heading down to the palace, all tobacco smoke and last week's gossip. Night she won bingo, she dropped by their Panoramic Lounge to chat with her brothers. A quick rum and coke warms the blood for the walk home, she'd say. Get her in the woods, and she was all business. The frantic flick of the rod whipped the hackle off the fly long before a trout ever could. Her peals of laughter against the far shore. No smooth arcs or figure-8 false casts. Just enough line in the water to get wet. A woman most at home without ceilings and without walls. Was going to read another one to do with grandmothers, but it's actually, it's a little sad. And I think after reading the Jackatar definition piece, I'm going to turn things out of that direction a little bit. So this piece, another one named after a family member, my father, you know, the act, like it was his conversations about trying to tell me about how just, you know, 40 years ago, at the time he told me 35 years ago, that he lived in a place with no electricity, no phone, no running water, no plumbing. And it was less than 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers from where we were sitting. And that just kind of, you know, at the first iterations, and I'm a teenager, I'm like, yeah, uphill both ways in the snow, we all get it. But of course, over time, and then after reading Percy Jane's novel Crow Gulch, House of Hate, which disparages Crow Gulch quite heavily, that's when I kind of got, I got wise to what my father was trying to tell me. And so this is named after him, Rudolph James Goff, Jr. Baby of the family, first born in a hospital. Namesake. Delivered by Noel Murphy, English war doctor turned town dignitary. Rudy never saw a car until kindergarten. but was so used to the train passing right by the house. Everything hardened to scale. He left the Gulch at 6, ended up the anti-bully of Dunfield Park. No friend went unavenged. He got his teeth kicked in by 2 older fellas, chased out of C.C. Lachlan for chasing someone in. He loved underdogs, anyone who had to do without. He idolized his father, such subdued strength. Heard stories of his grandfather Ralph's bare-knuckle boxing matches, that short time in the infantry in the First War. Claims he snuck in to enter the Dragon a dozen times. Spent the day collecting bottles to cash in at the coke plant. Stood outside the cinema asking anyone old enough to bring him in. Then he'd hide under the seats between screenings, make sure he got his money's worth. He spent half his 20s in Toronto. Factories, tobacco farms, the odd construction site. Still laughs to himself when he hears Stompin' Tom's Tiltsenburg. Always this need to live up to this lineage. He drank raw eggs, lifted free weights, watched Rocky III over and over. The story about the time he tossed some punk clean over a taxi for starting shit. Or when the station wagon broke down, he pushed it up Bayview Heights while my mom steered, white-knuckled in prayer against a heart attack. By 25, he was built like a bank vault, but never left the house or hung up the phone without telling his folks he loved them. He still kisses my cheek in airports. This small town alchemist still teaching me the evolution of strength, how to live up to a name so wrought with work and so heavy now with love. And I think I want to be conscious of time, so we'll just do one more. And this is one of the last poems that came together for the book and wasn't part of the original text. It was going through the editing process with Robin Richardson, and a few conversations with her ended up generating like 5 or 6 new pieces, which was a wonderful surprise. But this one was also the hardest one to write because it's about my mother. And how do you write about somebody who was literally everything? This, again, another name title, Geraldine Winifred Walbourne. Toronto born, city slick until the family moved back home when she was 15. She watched the CN Tower go up, got to see Queen live in '78, Bohemian. She looks like Princess Diana, the light eyes and the height, her noble nose perfectly askew, sculpture. Back in the Rock, she lived out of a tent until the family saved enough to rent. Bathing in Grand Lake until November, cold water became laughable. She still sleeps with the window open year-round. She birthed the bastard boy at 22, moved back to Brampton, lasted a year or two before flying home to face her father, a newly minted Pentecost pastor. Friction. The boy's father nowhere, despite child support court orders. Show me the money. She found sitters, worked behind counters, behind sewing machines, behind ovens, behind our kitchen sink, our stove, behind every piecemeal biweekly paycheck turned place to live, enough to eat, behind every scrap of clothes that kept the boy warm. At 24, she meets my father. The night she meets him, she loses her grandmother, jokes about him being cursed, bad luck. This young buck from the wrong side of town, his last name both preceding and dragging behind him, like a loose bootlace, a bad fit. His long hair and denim, cowboy boots, a face like Bo Brady, but shy. This is where I truly begin, H2. She's still Mercury to me, steeled against life's battery of bills, deaths, and family politics, but her laughter is liquid light, filling rooms to burst. Her mind is magma, is scalpel sharp, is Scrabble smart, an eternal summer solstice. Her heart, things of this depth, I'll simply never know. Well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Douglas. That was great.
Thanks.
Okay, up next, we are going to have Shaolin Jodry. Shaolin is a Mi'kmaq mother, poet, playwright, oral storyteller, and ecologist. Using her theatrical background, Shaolin brings Mi'kmaq stories to a new generation of listeners, as well as recounting personally crafted narratives that follow Mi'kmaq story and customs. The author of 3 books, her most recent book, Waking Ground, was shortlisted for the J.M. Abrams Atlantic Poetry Award, the Maxine Tynes Nova Scotia Poetry Award, the 2021 Pat Lowther Memorial Award, and the 2021 Indigenous Voices Award for Poetry in English. Shaolin recently wrote and performed her second theatrical play. After a successful 2-night performance of this solo show, Shaolin and the production team are looking forward to the upcoming 2-week run on the Neptune main stage in Halifax. Shaolin lives in her home territory, southwest Nova Scotia, with her family in the community of Elsutguk, Bear River First Nations, Nova Scotia. I will hand it over now to Shaolin.
Yes, well, Alan for the introduction. Well, Alan Douglas for starting us off in a good way, good, intimate way, lots of sharing, so that's great. I know that that we're all here, that we have our own relationship to land and place, and how that influences our art, and it absolutely, the land and place absolutely influences the art that I create and the stories and the writing. So the first one that I wanted to share with you is called Here. It was this Mahamigao who birthed our language, cradled and cawed, bellowed lightning into drumlin fields, bled fire, until we spoke of it, of mastodons and the way rivers move. One of my favorite things to do while working on learning the Mi'kmaq language has been looking at the Mi'kmaq place name atlas online, which now has a little bit of a facelift I see on social media, new site. And just going through, like looking at those places and looking at the words and what those translate as. And so it was really neat to see how rivers are named. And so that was the moment that that poem came to be. But sometimes I write about a serious moment or event that had happened, and sometimes I just want to remember and capture this moment of just beauty. And maybe it seems like just something mundane, just going for a walk, but sometimes it just feels so powerful that that you just kind of play that that image. It's like, oh yes, remember last week, remember last month, that walk. And so after one of my sweetgrassing harvest walks with my partner, I came home to write a poem about it so that I could remember that. And every time I read it, just remember, it puts me back in that place. So this is called Sweetgrassing. Between salt and forest, past the high tide mark of weeds, is the sweet site. Mud rich with scent as cinnamon, drawing my feet into deep embrace. Sections popping as the bases release, giving up root. I descend, coddling the grass in my face like an auntie, pleasured by the long-awaited reunion. Crawling through, eyeing up blades, losing myself in the green. And I say like an auntie because, you know, when you're waiting through the spring, like it's not even spring yet, and I'm waiting for that, you know, for that summer heat, that once you go closer to the earth, you know, that it's much cooler. And so, you know, you get this such a different types of good medicine when you know, on a hot July day and you go to the beach to cool off. But yet just spending time with family that way, and knowing that the sweetgrass that you're harvesting, that's going to be, most of it is all gifts. It's for gifts. It's braids, or my partner weaves it in baskets. So I hope that that everybody on the call has one of their favorite places on the land to sit and listen, or to snowshoe, somewhere to be outside. And I wrote this next poem. Some of you probably already heard it. I've been reading it a lot lately, but I wrote it for particularly for women who have been doing the ceremony work, just the work during the day, just uplifting nations and families, and so I wrote this for them. It's called Ceremony for the End of Day. When the herons fly homebound at dusk, lifting on the last current of warm air, the river route is long and arduous. When the hardship of flight is peaked and tempered, go ahead, remove your ornaments. Watch your hands articulate the unlayering, a ceremony of undoing. Hang your garments with certainty, acknowledging how many generations survived and how today you held space. Walk barefoot to San Juan. Inhale with the force of gravity. Rattle loose the fragments lodged where you never thought you'd heal. Let your breath reach all the places you didn't trust to keep you steady. Sip water from your cupped hands. Roll it over you like a thunderstorm, and exhale so slowly that every bit of you melts. Sap going back to ground. Roots throbbing from thirst. Herons shake their feathers, fold their wings, and rest. So sometimes for me, poetry, you know, can be ceremony in itself, or poetry can be medicine by the writing of it, and sometimes it's those things by the reading of it. So thank you for listening. This next one, sometimes I write about trees and forests. For those of you who don't know, I have a fondness for trees and forests. Even my theater show, the main character is an old tree. And so sometimes looking at the way a forest is, or an ecosystem, it helps inspire me, just like listening to elders, you know, is really inspirational. But sometimes, you know, when I'm not sure, I'm wrestling with something, you know, just going for a walk, sometimes I can kind of see, well, you know, how does a forest heal? You know, how does a forest grow? And in Nova Scotia, we do have a lot of clear cutting that happens throughout the forest. And so I think a lot about healing. And I think about our own Ulnu history. So this is called Raising Forests. We are not the first generation to lose forests. as trees were slain for ships and forts. All new hunters were refused entry to their territory, fracturing livelihoods and continuity. In this landscape, there have been many ends of the world as one knows it. Parents mourned children at the edges of cliffs. Guardians became chained to bottles. To know the stories, as story carriers do, is to constantly taste scars where the wounds had long punctured through. People already devastated by massacres of forests. Each new generation's lost battle to save trees. Too many centuries of someone's world in pieces. Let's tend to the forests like prophets. Encourage them to wilder in old growth and watch them mature into being. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Walaliach.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Okay, last up, we have Michelle Sylliboy. Award-winning author and award-winning interdisciplinary artist, Michelle Sylliboy was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and raised on her traditional Ilnu territory, Waigoma, Cape Breton. While living on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, Sylliboy completed a BFA at Emily Carr University of Art and Design and a master's in education from Simon Fraser University. She's currently a PhD candidate in Simon Fraser University's Philosophy of Education program, where she is working to reclaim her original written Mi'kmaq language. Her collection of poetry and Ilnuk hieroglyphic poetry, I don't remember how to say it, I'm sorry, Michelle. Geskaje, I Am Ready, was published by Rebel Mountain Press in 2019, now available as an ebook. She was recently appointed at SFX University as a new tenure track faculty in the Education, Modern Language, and Fine Arts departments. Take it away, Michelle.
Walali Ashley. Walali or Douglas or Shaolin. Okay, I'm going to do a little different type of chat. I'm going to share the work that I've been working on since my exhibition started back in 2000. Can you see that? Yeah? Okay, then I have to go slideshow. So I started to part of my work has been about reclaiming the Gomhajui Gasigo, which is the suckerfish language that my elders call, because when a suckerfish leaves marks in the sand, it creates these lines, and so the language itself is a very descriptive language. Oftentimes, if you're ever wanting to learn the Mi'kmaq language, it's very difficult because you'll get different interpretations of what something means, and they're all correct because it's really about somebody's how somebody sees the world, and which makes it very complicated to learn. I'm still learning and I'm fluent, but I don't consider myself 100% fluent because each generation has their own memories around the language. And so my father's generation would have been, those who are in their 80s would have had been taught by their parents. So that's, a couple generations removed. But when I wrote the book, I just came home from British Columbia. I was in Vancouver for 27 years. And since 1988, I started to think about, this written language that we have. But I kept putting it aside until I was ready to do it. And then it came out during my when it was time to do my PhD. And while I was researching, I started to think about, how can I make this a living curriculum, a living entity, or bring it out of the context of the Catholicism, because it was published as Catholic prayers. And so the last publication, major publication, would have been in Catholic prayers in the early, late, I would say, if the 70s, 1670s, it was being compiled and put together and used to convert my ancestors to Catholicism. And so this book is the first Mi'kmaq hieroglyphic poetry book, whereas the language is used in a modern day context. And that was the goal. My goal was to take the language and use it as if we're using the English language. And then I started to think further about, how do I, what do I see as a poet? And how do I, what kind of messages do I want to convey? And because the language itself was originally used as maps. And so the language comes from the land. That's why I was, happy to say yes to this particular theme of today's poetry reading, because it's structured around land and place, and our language is very land-based and very central to how we work the land, deal with the land, live in the land, and be one with the land. And so it was natural for me to write about it and also connect current history and the past, present, and future. And so when the children were being apprehended at the border and some went missing, I needed to acknowledge those missing children. And I also wanted to acknowledge the children that went missing at residential schools. And so everything started to connect towards our current, what's going on, which eventually becomes, history. But my art, as a visual artist, I started to take the poetry and put it into art, because I'm an interdisciplinary artist, and I took part in this exhibition in Calgary where Indigenous artists from across Canada were doing work with their own Indigenous languages. And my whale bones that were shown at Eastern Edge went to Calgary, and that particular exhibition gained great reviews in the art magazines, and many galleries wanted to show the work. But my whale bones were snapped up by Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, where it's exhibiting right now. And so the curator asked if we could take two of my poems and create a panel, a double-sided panel, and this one, "In the Future, Who Will Ease Your Heart in the Garden?" And on the other side, "Old water, you wipe clean my flesh, I honor you." And both of these pieces, when you go back to, I think about our relationship, and our relationship to humans, to earth, and I try to make sense of how that impacts us as human beings and what we take for granted. Part of this piece is about wanting to have that companionship and waiting for that time when that will occur. And so it's a bit of and also this type of relationship that we have around land, water, and nourishment around food, because we take it for granted in this world, where, but in other parts of the world, there's many parts of the world where food is so scarce, and so it's a bit of a multi-layered piece.
Michelle, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Um, we're not seeing your slides cycle through if you're going through the slides. I'm just seeing the like screen with the first slide and the other one's small. Someone else just put in the chat that they're also not seeing the slides.
Really?
Yeah, maybe just try sharing it again. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay.
So if I'm going back to old
Yeah,
water.
I can see it now. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. And so when I wrote this piece, I wanted, how we take things for granted, regardless of what it is, even water. You take a shower, you take a bath, you wash your hands, and this whole COVID thing, we're constantly washing our hands and stuff like that. But do we acknowledge the water? Do we thank the water for doing its duty, because it's working? The water's alive. It's like constantly replenishing you, feeding you, keeping you alive. Our bodies are made out of water. And when I wrote this piece, I was very cognizant about that, because I think I was camping somewhere. I was homeless when I wrote this, and I was living in a shed in Inverness, and water was really I couldn't get it. And so I started to think, oh my God, I take this for granted. And then one day I was able to wash my hair, and it was a revelation for me, because it was like, oh, here I am doing my dissertation, a doctoral degree, and I'm living in a shed trying to find water. And so it's kind of the irony in that. And so I wanted to acknowledge the circumstances that were happening in that moment. And so it's a very layered, all the pieces, all the poems are layered, especially what we take for granted. And this particular piece is about our current situation around COVID. And I wanted to write about what's going on. And I had taken a photograph of this wicker chair, and these symbols reminded me of Mi'kmaq motifs, and I thought, oh, this is very interesting. And I started painting it, and on my iPad. And then I had just written 7 poems, and I thought, I really want to highlight what's happening now around the world and the impact it's having towards our relationship with each other, our relationship to land, because COVID kind of saved Mother Earth. Mother Earth had a break from humanity. And I think in the early, I don't know, do you remember when we had our, what do you call it? When COVID started 2 years ago this month, people started taking pictures of animals going through the streets of cities around the world, and Mother Nature was given a break from us, from humanity, and the destruction it was doing on Mother Earth. And so these poems talk about that, and talk about our resiliency and stuff like that. And so this is a very interesting piece. And then I write about water. Water is something that I like returns over and over in all of the work that I do, and even when I carve whale bones, and the piece I showed you earlier, acknowledging the existence of water and thanking water, and because the water is a living entity. And so this one here, in this world, I think well of you for as long as we live. Water, I honor you. And so it's, again, it's that multi-layered existence of, how we take for granted what has been around for millions of years, billions of years. And then I started to work with elders, and because I hang around with elders quite often, and I miss them right now because COVID. We have to be safe and not put our elders at risk. But when the children were first unearthed in Kamloops, I wanted to do something, and so I called up my elders and language speakers, and because somebody had asked. She emailed me. She goes, Michelle, what's the hieroglyphic symbol for 215? And I said, I don't think there is one, but let's get together with people that might know. And we spent 2 days together. And during that time, I think it was Manitoba that announced 750 more children. And so we decided that we would make a statement to honor the children as they were being found and released, their spirits released finally, peacefully. And so each time it becomes a poem. It's so poetic, It's like, children, they found you, you were buried, we love you. And I've been keeping tabs of how many have been found so far, and right now it's 2058, and there's a lot of posters going around. 10,000 children were unearthed, and I'm like, no, that's not true. We haven't gotten there. We might get there by the time everything is, counted, but right now the number is 2058, and there's still, I guess, 128 more schools to go. And I think by the time all the schools, and then not all the schools found anything, like here in Nova Scotia, they say there's no children buried. But I know my auntie remembers, before she died, she remembers children being incinerated. So how many of those children were incinerated? And they're not going to be buried because they were burnt, so that story is still ongoing. And so, when we think about our relationship to the land and to the food, and I make a point, and my poems are I call them my hieroglyphic haikus. You don't need a lot to say a lot, and so I'm enjoying the short descriptions and writing in a way that gives that punch, and so, and I'm gonna leave you. I'm gonna go. During this whole process, I've been collaborating with musicians, and I did a little concert at Eastern Edge as part of my exhibition there. But I did that by across Canada. I did it in Halifax. I did it in St. John's. I did it in Vancouver. And each time I did it, the collaborative performances were very powerful. And so when I step out of that place of just writing poetry and bringing poetry to another level, because I believe that music is poetic and our words are poetic, and how do you combine all of these things without it being a song? And so are you seeing the same slide live at Obey? Can you guys, somebody tell me? Yeah?
Yep, I can see the slide with the link on it.
Okay, so I'm gonna play this, I'm gonna end this here. uh, we'll fight for her. And we'll fight for her, meaning we will fight for Mother Earth. That's what this piece is about. We'll fight for her. How old is Wajoosun? Drifting around, waiting to be discovered. An ancient female spirit, older than time, revealed herself one day, reconfirming how spiritual we are in her infinite wisdom. She reminded me of a dream that came true. Two-legged bears with their unknown smells, traveling with purpose to reshape landscapes with their body politics of golden dreams. Power-hungry elitists changing natural laws to legally rape Mother Earth, calling it progress, creating jobs with no desire to protect our water, our food supply, our cultural survival, our air. In retaliation, I imagine raindrops pouring down sideways on every forked tongue. Niskamich, Jigsadoing. Mother Earth has been tormented, raped, beaten, silenced enough. Help us fight back with your cosmic energy, cosmic life. Wajoosun, fly across each world with your drumbeats of hope, with your landscapes of spiritual life forces. This land is sacred. We are here to protect her. This land has memory. We must ensure her vast knowledge is not destroyed. This land has power. We will draw upon her strength to help her in this fight. There you go. That's the story of Michelle Sylliboy. In a nutshell.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for including that audio clip with the sound. That was great.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us on this fine afternoon. Oh, hi, Jerry.
So we can open it up to questions now if anyone wants to turn on their camera and voice a question or write one in the chat. I can pose a question to get us started just while everyone else is thinking. Something Douglas said that stuck with me was, how do you write about someone who is literally everything? And I was thinking about that, you know, not just about people, but about the land, water, about residential schools. So maybe for any of you that want to answer, like, how do you begin to write about something that's so big?
Well, if it's part of your story, it's part of your, sorry.
No, by all means. Yeah, just to continue with what Michelle just said, I was recently approached to review Duncan McCurdy's book 215, which of course speaks to the 215 children, and I considered it, the book was sent to me, and I realized I don't have that knowledge, I don't have that connection, that history, and so sometimes it's not my place to reflect and to think and to maybe educate myself, yes, but not to write on and to disseminate information, to explore. It's just simply this, in this case, it wasn't my place to do so. So I just, I had to, you know, hat in hand say, I humbly have to, you know, I can't do this work in the ways that I think it should be done, as well as it could be done. And again, just because it wasn't my place to do so. So I think learning to know those moments have become important.
Yeah, I mean, I only write about things that are happening to me, my history, and who I am. You know, I'm a federal day school survivor. I went to federal day school. My parents, my mother that gave birth to me was a residential school survivor, and my father that raised me was a survivor, and so the impact is, I'm affected on all levels, and so it's important for me to acknowledge that and how it's impacting me every time I hear those news stories of children being unearthed. And so, um, I think most writers write what they know and what's going on, what's impacting them. That and some, I mean, I don't write things I don't know about, so or how it doesn't impact me in some way.
Yeah. I know with artists, it's a lot of like, you make art as a coping mechanism to deal with things that are going on around you. So I guess for poetry, it can be very similar.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so. It's yeah. How about you, Shaolin?
Yeah. But to just kind of for a moment go back a little bit and like, how do you write about something that's just so big? And there's different kinds of something so big, be it those children or a mother, or the land, right? And I guess just to be part of that part of the conversation, yeah, for me, I guess I'm not trying to write about it all. In every art piece that I do, and by art, I mean creative writing art, every piece that I work on, I just know it's just this, I'm just looking at this thing, right, in my life, this moment. And there's all these other things. And so it's also frustrating sometimes when people expect you to be speaking to everything in your culture. You can't address it all, and so you can't address all of the things about your mother or the land or old new history. We're just, so I'm just picking this little thing that I was inspired to, like, just kind of look at this little piece, this crooked tree right here while I'm paddling my canoe, or this sweet grassing moment, or this thought that I have. And so that's how I kind of tackle that. And so therefore, it is this, I write about the stuff around me, right? Because that's what I'm seeing or feeling or reflecting on.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm just going to keep asking you guys questions. I can come up with at least a few more. I really liked when Michelle was talking about language as a map and how, like, through learning the language, you can learn more about the place, but also like maybe a map of your family and your history. I'm wondering if any of you, including Michelle, have more thoughts on language as maps.
I I can't speak for Shaolin or Douglas, but I grew up with the language, and so when you, if you're able to learn the language, you start to make the connections in the land, and also about the land and the history of the land. There are words when they talk about the Beotalks, Bidokwa. We say Bidokwa, and I've heard one cousin say that Bidokwa actually is the Newfoundlanders. And so there's people in communities at one point, Bidokwa, they would, they lived in certain parts of the reserve, and those were the families that came from Newfoundland. And so the relationship was, yes, the settlers came and tried to annihilate, but they came into our nation to survive. And so that intermarriaging, and so we know whose families came from Newfoundland, so that because they ran away from the gunpowder that was introduced. How can you run from something? But we were very good seafaring people, and the canoe, we had canoes that can go across the ocean, no problem. So it wasn't an issue, but it's in the language. So once you learn the language and start to understand and dissect the connection between the land and how what each word means, then you have that relationship to place, and you start to map out, because even the root word of each language, sometimes a word has several different components to it, and so it breaks up into different meanings and things are added to, and I'm not a linguist, but this is how I've learned as an observer of the language. I've learned that, how things have been adapted and how things have changed and how it's connected to what we're describing in front of us. So, I don't know if I went off topic, Ashley. Did that answer?
No, you did answer the question. Yeah. I don't know if Douglas or Shalan wanted to say anything. Shalan's agree. Wanted to say anything about that, about languages and maps.
Douglas, you want to add?
Well, Michelle's reply just made me think, like, because my my experience, like, I don't even know if my grandmother spoke Mi'kmaq. That's one of the things I'm trying to write my way into those questions now. And maybe that's one of the reasons that I can't make that connection with her in my dreams, the same as my grandfather. Maybe language is the missing key there. And so, I mean, Crow Gulch is intentionally written in English because having a handful of Mi'kmaq words that I can use doesn't, I felt like until I have much more of a grasp of not just knowing how to replicate a word at a certain point in time to communicate, but like what the map, the history, the meaning, everything behind those words, then I'll feel a bit better putting them into poems. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think I've just got a lot more creative questions now in a really good way. So yeah, thank you, Michelle, for sparking those thoughts.
When I say maps, Ashley, like when it was first used as maps, the hieroglyphics were used as maps. So if a hunter would leave their, they would tell their partner or family members and draw out a map of where the moose is located. And so they still do that today. Hunters will draw a hieroglyphic map and of the location of where they left their moose. It hasn't gone away. It's always been used primarily by hunters. And so that's why.
So it's like literally a map.
It was literally a map. And so the language comes from the land. And then, of course, it evolved, right? Everything evolves. And so depending on who, some people believe that the church invented the language, but yet the petroglyphs, I truly believe the petroglyphs should be called the Gonghajwi because somebody left those markings to tell a story. So if you go to Kejimekujik, those markings are writing about the relationship, the first people that dropped their anchor. It's literally about that. So it's a story. So I want our people to reclaim that and stop calling them petroglyphs, because really it's our language. Those are stories that somebody wanted to make sure that we didn't forget what happened. And so yeah. Anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting thinking about language as a map literally and then also metaphorically. So even in like Douglas, your work, like you might not be using Mi'kmaq words, but I'm seeing you're describing this place that doesn't exist in the same way anymore. And in that way, you're kind of creating a map of how it once was. So I think that's cool too. Shalan, I will get it. Shalan, did you have anything to say on that, or should we move on?
Well, it just right away reminds me of what I was saying earlier about looking at the place name atlas and looking at those. So how Michelle was talking about how the language is really descriptive, or yeah, that was referred to. And so when you see all these place names talking about describing the land, that the river is stopped up with rocks, or that there's a bend in it, and so you can follow. So it's not like a place name, like, oh, that's Smith Rock and Johnson Lake, that you're describing it. And so I'm standing here in Ulsakuk in not really in the river. Oh my gosh, mixing languages does not sound correct, but I'm standing here in Bear River First Nation in the community, and I didn't grow up here. I moved all over the country with my because my father was in the military, but I moved here as an adult, so I've been here for a while. But something that I've learned a lot from the people here is is about their relationship with land. And so they still they'd still describe the land, even though it's English words. They described, oh, well, when you get to the fork in the brook and you see the big boulder, so they'll describe, but using the English words, describe the path. And my partner talks about that, how years and years and decades of going fishing with his uncles and friends, that you just describe to each other where you're going to meet, the big north facing boulder next to the big pine tree or whatever it is, and everybody knows, okay, we'll meet there for lunch. And so yeah, so I think about this a lot, about the literal, the metaphorical, but that geography, and also that language, reclaiming the language is so important to me. And I also realize and recognize that also relationship to land, no matter what you're speaking, how do you walk that land? How do you learn from the land? And how do you describe that? So I think about maps in all kinds of ways. You can tell a story that the story is a map, or a song can be that map. So yeah, it's great things to think about.
Thank you. Do any of you have questions for each other?
I do have a question for Douglas. I do.
Yeah, sure.
Although I'm sure I would love long chats with both of you. What did your mother say about that poem?
She was upset that I called myself a bastard, but it's one of the reasons that, like, okay, so on my dad's side, there's the not really Catholic, not really Catholic, Mi'kmaq, from Crow Gulch, hard life, hard living. Then my mother's side, my grandfather was a Pentecost pastor. Him and my grandmother were missionaries in Labrador. Then when she passed, his second wife, they were missionaries in Natwashish for a while. So there's this white, not purely white, but European missionary influence on one side, and then this complete clash of that on the other side. And I've been trying to sort out how both of those come together in my personal history. Sorry, I just lost the question there, because I've literally been trying to work on
the poem about her. Yeah. So what did she say?
Yeah. So that clash came about. I was born. My pastor grandfather was very upset. Him and one of my mother's sisters had some very harsh words. And we left, Mom and I left when I was an infant, and we escaped all that for a couple of years. So that word for her, bastard, is very loaded. And it broke my heart that, it hurt her, but at the same time, and like, I needed her to also, like, I shouldn't, and I'm learning not to, but part of that word's always going to come with me, because I've never met my biological father, because he just chose not to be around. That is what it is. Repercussions are still ongoing, and but in spite of all that, I also wanted to let her know, like, there are so many ways this could have played out for her as a woman of 22 years old, who suddenly has a baby by herself, and she chose to do what she could to make me happy and keep me safe. So we had a lot of very we had long conversations around it, some really big tears and opening up, and like in joyful ways, some tough ways, but yeah, now it's one that I have trouble reading without crying. Today has been a successful day, even though I almost did. And yeah, it's one that she reads with some she takes some time and space with it when she does. And my parents are not poets, they're not readers. You know, poetry, books aren't their thing, let alone poetry. So the fact that she will sit and reread that poem kind of, I hope I've come close to honoring everything she's done for me, even though a poem is such a small gift in return.
Mhm.
So it's a long-winded answer.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. And Michelle, I know you're championing you know, this whole reclamation of these fish were Gocham. Oh, sorry. Can you teach us how to say it?
Sure.
Teach us.
So the first part, I'll type it in the chat. So gomhuej is a so gomhuej. So gomh. So you have that up here in your throat. So gomhuej. All right.
And actually, Douglas joined me.
So, and as poets and writers, this is the best part. So wigasigo means writing.
Wigasigo.
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 So gomhuajuwi gasigo.
Wigasigo.
Yeah, good, close enough.
It's
Yeah.
rough.
Yeah. Gomhuajuwi gasigo. So gomhuaj is a suckerfish, wigasigo. So we a week again. So all of us, we're writers. So we again. So we write our books. So Dwigadigan is your book, and Awigagan is you're writing something. So Dahoyawigaman is something that you're writing. So Wigasigal is Wigasigal. So you can say Wigasigal. Wigasigal is also another way, is something that is already written. You know, Wigasigal. Kung Wigasigal. That was in it. Oh, my brain just went on a break in Kejimkujik. So, yeah. So if you're describing, I said that there are things written down in Kejimkujik is basically what I just said. So, yeah. What was your question?
I just wanted to talk about it because I know you're championing it. I was curious, you know, where the curriculum, like where is that now? Like, have you developed things with elders or others that are in schools now, or is that still what you're doing?
Oh, here's the thing. The art is a living curriculum.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've been trying to tell people from the beginning. But people are the Grand Chief goes, "Oh, Dr. Hieroglyphic." It's like, no, like I'm not a linguist, so but I created the work, the art, as a living curriculum. The poetry is living curriculum. We have to really think about what is a curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
What is how do we educate each other? So when I do the t-shirts and the clothing line, that's living curriculum, right? And so the poetry book is a living curriculum. And so when you start to decolonize, you have to decolonize what education is and how we as ONU teach each other or learn from each other, because we learn by seeing, we learn by doing. And in order for me to express that, I do the art because people see it. And so doing this whole dissertation project was about planting seeds, so that other poets will write, poems, because it's the same way we use the English language.
Mm-hmm.
We're using those alphabet words, letters, to write these poems. So why can't we, as Mi'kmaq people, write hieroglyphic poems?
I see Jerry has a question for you. Hi, Jerry.
Is there a word phrase for mark maker Artists that create images with marks. So a weegaman, Dampaskoy, a weegaman. That is a mark maker, a weegaman, whatever it is you're writing. So you're a weegum, a weegaman. I guess that would be it, a weegaman.
Because in English, we think of writing as the letters, but when you're talking about wigasigul, it could be words, but it could be pictures. So yeah, where is that difference?
Ewigasigul is like something that's being written or yeah, I mean Ewigasigul is something that's already been written, but is that Wigasigul? Well, no, that's kind of writing. So don't forget the language is descriptive. So what are you marking? So as a tattoo artist, is that what you're trying to, I think that's where you're coming from, right? So a weegaman, and also, some people call artists Gisidoodle, there's a gallery in Sydney and they called it Gisiduik. And Gisiduik just means we made it. And so Dahoy Eldun or Dahoy Ewigaman or Dahoy, Igadun, it really depends on the situation as a visual artist, yeah. And so Eldun, when you're making something, Eldun, you're making it. Because it's a descriptive language. So Dahoy Eldun, whatever it is you're making, it means Eldun, Gil, you. So Neen, Gil, Negum. So Neen is me, Gil is you, Negum is them. So Neen, Eldu, Gisidua, Ewigumab, on this Budu. This is a whalebone. And so you're describing the situation. Yes, Jerry, come and visit. I'm still waiting for you to visit.
Looking forward to this other webinar that's all about
This can become a
I know. I'm becoming a teacher here now. Hey, that's a whole other website or talk.
Thank you for explaining all that, Michelle, though. It's really interesting how the words describe the process more than like the final goal. Like you're not necessarily an artist, you're a person who's making something.
You are an artist, but you're describing what you're doing.
Describing the process, yeah.
Yeah. And so the language is a very descriptive language, which means you can ask 100 different people how to say artist, and they'll all give you 100 different responses. Now, are they wrong? No, it's because it's how they see it. So it makes it complicated. That's right. Come and visit. We should have a forum about that, though. As artists, we should. Eastern Edge, set it up. There you go.
I'll write it in my schedule. What's up, Douglas?
Well, I just had a question I wanted to pose to Shalan and Michelle in both, like, because I'm not sure, Shalan, what your current relation, if at all, to academics is. I know Michelle, sounds like you're just about through or all the way through the PhD process. I'm just finished my exams, but I think publishing and sometimes festivals and performing and stuff, these things kind of, I've got some great supports, but I've also been through the academic experience, particularly for me and lately, there's been not much care. So like Michelle, when you were talking about particularly, how we see and do, but I've been hoping to find space in what I'm doing creatively and academically, particularly because they're kind of together. I want to bring how I feel also into that, and there's a lot of not room made for that, or there's not much room made for that. So I was wondering if through academics or publishing or like formal spaces, like have you faced the same things, and if so, like what gets you past that, or how do you counter that?
The holistic model, I mean, everyone wants to decolonize. The academy wants to decolonize, and when you try to approach your decolonial pedagogy, uh, it's frustrating when they try to push on you a Western approach,
Hmm.
and yet they're wanting you to decolonize. It's
Yeah,
like,
speak out of here, then speak out of there.
yeah, it's like, make up your mind, don't hire me if you're just gonna push a westernized ideology on me, or a way of doing things, when you hired me to um, decolonize, that you wanted my decolonial approach as a Mi'kmaq person. And so, yeah, it's quite complicated, but I know that Linda Tuwali Smith has a great book on decolonizing
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
academy. Um, Lee Miracle, uh, uh, before she passed away, she wrote a lot about, the she would be a good person, Shalan,
Mhm.
to she has a you can get an ebook, you can get her book. I think it's called
What's it? My Conversations with Canadians.
that one. There's another one. Let's see if I can find.
I really
I
like
just
Memory Serves as well, as an oral story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Lee did that. It's a very good, um, you know, Jordan Abel, Nishka writes about his process, and how he, and so it really, it you just have to not allow the academy to take over your voice. Screw them. Do it. No, I'm
Yeah.
serious, because we've been inundated to think in a very westernized approach to what knowledge is,
Yeah.
and how to teach knowledge, and what is education. Even Shalin's question about, have you, done the curriculum? But I did the exhibition. The exhibition is the curriculum. It's a living exhibition. So each time, as an artist, that is our curriculum, And so the poetry book is a curriculum. And so we have to undo what people think a curriculum is.
Mm.
So every time you do something, Shaolin, that is your living curriculum.
Mhm.
You become a teacher as you know, you're a scholar in your own way. And how do we define what a scholar is? So redefining that.
Thank you.
Mm.
Okay, we're coming up on 3:30, so does anyone have any last comments before we put an end to it?
No, just thank you, Walalio.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you
Uh,
all so much for being here.
and
Sorry.
thank you to the audience, our very small little audience. That was like
Very quiet audience.
quiet, hiding behind their screens. Turn on your screens so we see you. Can we see you? Come on, don't be shy. Turn them on.
Show us your faces.
There you are. There
Yay.
you go. Come on, turn on your screens so we can see you.
Thank you. It was a wonderful workshop panel. Yeah, really enjoyed the conversation and the poetry.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
Um, just a little hello to Jerry. I know we haven't seen each other in quite a long time, but still hoping to get up to St. John's and have a little visit at some point.
Pam was supposed to come today. She didn't log on.
Yeah, there was more people that registered than showed up, but we'll put the link online so anyone who missed it can still watch it.
Yeah, since this is recording. Hi Pam, we missed you. I really appreciate everybody for hanging out with us and spending time with us this afternoon. It's a very weird time, afternoon to do something, but here we are, poets uniting, sharing the words, and thanks for doing this, Ashley and Eastern Edge.
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Before we end, I just have a couple housekeeping notes about the symposium. So today is the last day of the symposium, and our 2 last in-person events are full for in-person attendance, but there will be a link available to watch tonight's film screening online. That will be Spruce Root Basket by Evan Butler. So if you want the link, it's only going to be available temporarily, so just send us an email and you can watch that film from home on your computer. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Michelle, Douglas, and Shaolin. This was incredible. Okay, have a good weekend, everybody.
Numul tosib, well,
Well, y'all, take care, everyone.